Hello true crimers, and I hope you've had a fabulous week because I'm here again. And if you're new here, that is absolutely fine because I'm new too. So we can be new together. I don't know what to do this week. I'm like, what do I do with my chair? Do I make it look really cool? And I just thought, I'll just do a bit of that. Cue the music. Today's true crime as well, it combines one of my biggest phobias. Clowns. Yep, not a fan. Not a fan. I'm an avid horror movie obsessed watcher, so Stephen King pretty much fucked me up for life when I watched it and read the book. The book is way scarier. Now, through life, you're going to come across so many souls that are outgoing, they just have their shit in one sock. You know the sort, like, God, they've always got it going on. They're always involved in so much good stuff, a pillar of the community, one would say. Oh, you know John down the street? Oh, he's done so much for Shazza. Honestly, I'd trust him with my life. Now, what goes on behind closed doors and what people seem to be may not always be who they truly are. This outward exterior is merely a show. It's an act, a facade to what lies beneath the dermis. Now, today's true crime is about John Wayne Gacy. Now, John was a family man. He was very involved in the community and John was highly respected. His friends absolutely adored him. You could say that potentially he was too good to be true. Now, good old John, he would spend his free time volunteering at hospitals and charity events in the area, and while doing so, he would dress up as a clown. He would entertain the children and he loved it. John was born March 17th, 1942. His father was called John Stanley Gacy and his mother was called Marianne Elaine Robinson. Now, his dad wanted a manly man. Even from birth, you're going to be a man. There was none of this girly nonsense, no pansy shit round our household. You were going to be a big butch bloke. So he called John after a famous movie star called John Wayne. Google on YouTube if you don't know who he is. It's actually very good. Well, John was the middle child and he had two sisters. The family grew up on the north side of Chicago and John did not really have a good childhood. He was born with a heart defect, which pretty much left him slightly overweight and he couldn't sort of get involved with any sports at school or curricula really. So he sort of missed out on that boy friendship, kickabout football, that sort of stuff. Now, John was super close to his mum and his sisters, but the relationship with his father, well, that was extremely strained, mostly to his father's alcohol abuse and that his father was extremely verbally and physically aggressive and violent to the whole family, but particularly John. Now, when his father was heavily drinking, and he was verbally and physically abusive whilst not drinking, but this was more excelled level when his dad was extremely pissed. It was, he would be verbally abused, he would be targeted, John would stand in front of his father to protect his sisters and his mother, and be called a pansy, you're not a man, you're nothing, you're worthless. And we're talking about a boy that's not even hit puberty. Now, one of the earliest memories John has is his sort of relationship with his father, when John would have been 4 or 5 years of age, and he walked into the garage to find his daddy, and his dad had all the parts of the car laid out on the floor and they were all precisioned in the right spot where he needed them. And John, being a little boy, went and grabbed them and moved them around because I suppose he was trying to help and wanted to be a big boy. And he was beaten within an inch of his life, brutally beaten. Now, when John's mother would try and engage and step inside and say, you know, just leave the boy now, it would just entice him more. He would just go for John even more. Now, the sad situation was with John, he was so vulnerable because he never had anybody in the house that he could safely speak to without any repercussions. So when he was 5, he was actually molested by an older girl, and I think possibly maybe looking after him Now, in 1949, John and another boy were caught molesting a young girl who had mental disability, and yeah, his father literally nearly took his life with that beating. So John's growing up, and John's dad has this friend next door who's a contract worker. And he comes round to the house and he's like, do you know what, I'll take John out for an ice cream. We'll go out and get him out of your hair and I'll take him and look after him. Well, that guy actually would regularly take John out and buy him ice cream, but he would also get him in like wrestling moves and lock his head between his crotch and make him feel uncomfortable and just push the boundaries constantly, more and more and more, to the point when he actually did rape and abuse John. Now, because John had no ability to go to his parents and talk about anything, because the repercussions would have been completely that he was in the wrong, he's the bad boy, and he would have probably been beaten to death. So it got to a point where John actually was big enough to go man to man to his father and say, not for me, nah, I'm not going for ice cream anymore, don't ask me, I'm not going. And his dad never asked any questions, he just was like, right, that's fine. And that was it, no more. Now, John's childhood was horrific, but he went on to be a pillar of the community. I think this was like a validation or an acceptance from people due to his horrendous imprint as a child. And either way, I think John, he just wanted validation. He loved to be liked. He loved recognition. He loved a title. So either way, John became heavily involved with the community, and at the age of 18, John became an assistant president captain for a Democratic Party. He would also become an elected officer who was in charge of the voters' registration, basically getting absentee votes and obtaining party information on the grapevine. Now, he was the man who was in direct link with the people in the local election. He was the guy to trust. Got a problem? Go to John. Now, Senior Gacy, well, he was disgusted. What the F is all this? You're a pansy. God, you're embarrassing. Not impressed whatsoever. So John's in his last year of school, secondary school, high school in America, and he just leaves. He packs up and he's like to his mum, right, I'm going to go, I've got plans, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, I'm going. And he heads to LA. Now, in reality, he had no plans, nowhere to stay, and didn't have a clue what he was doing. He's winging it, which has been pretty much my whole life. I like to wing it. So he lands in LA and he walks into a funeral parlour and instantly gets the job. They're like, yep, we'll have you take you on, lad, no problem at all. Now, the guys that own it are actually really lovely, and they're like, well, where are you staying then, lad? Have you got somewhere to stay? And he's like, no, I actually haven't got a place yet. So they make him up a cot, is what I found in the research, but, you know, like a small bed. Made him up a bedroom for him, next door to the embalming room. Okay. Now, there isn't a shitter in hell for me to go and sleep in an embalming room or next door to one or even 3 fucking streets away. No. I'd be quicker than Kate Bush running up that fucking hill and saying, see you mate, no thanks, not for me. Gone. Obviously without being disrespectful, I would have just been like, I'm going to go outside with this gorgeous blanket that you've offered me and I'm going to perch my arse in that bush because that just looks so cosy out there. But the embalming room, side room, it's just not for me. Now for John, he was just happy to have somewhere to rest his head. He had a roof and he appreciated it. Now when the shop was shut each night, John would be just completely left alone in the funeral parlour, just him and the corpses. Now he later stated that he would get into the coffins and cuddle the corpses. Now once in the funeral parlour there actually was a teenage deceased boy that came in. And, well, John got in with the corpse and he made a quick dart back to home within about 3 months because the owners, well, they found all the corpses' bodies, clothes scattered all over the floor because he'd actually undressed them and, yeah, they were like, no, we don't do that shit around here. Sorry, take your quirks and fuck off back home. Thank you very much. No thanks, slam. Now, all that new John said he was the most normal guy you could ever meet. It made me giggle because we know that word, it doesn't exist. Oh no. Now it's for John. So basically John is an active member of the community. He was funny, outgoing. I just don't think it would have been easy. It would not have been easy for anybody to go, something strange about that guy. Nah, cagey as hell, don't like him. Something not quite right with him. There was nothing. There was no red flag whatsoever. Now, in later interviews, John admitted that that moment in the funeral parlour, well, it freaked the shit out of him. He was actually traumatised by his own behaviour. And why did I do that? What made me do that? It's fucking weird. But also, it enlightened him to a darkness in his heart. And the light definitely switched off for him at that point to a very dark heart. He felt like the darkness had lured him in. And he felt very at home in the dark. So John gives his mummy a call and he's like, look, just want to know how the water lies at home because I need to come back basically. I've lost my job and what's Dad going to do if I come back? What do you reckon? Can I come back? And she was just completely, yes, John, come back home. I'll make you your favourite tea. Everything's fine. Your dad's just pissed building something. You won't notice that you've even gone. Hurry up. So after 3 months, John returns back home and he starts at a business college and he graduates in 1963. John moves with a job over to Springfield to be a salesman selling shoes. And once settled, John gets involved with the community again. So John joins a non-profit training company which focuses on parole, misdevelopment, management skills. So basically just to reintroduce people that have gone down a dark path back into the community successfully with some sort of qualifications to prosper. So it's actually, a really good job. Now, John loved this job so much. He literally was the roots and shoots of the establishment. I mean, again, anybody there who needed anything, ask John. He was committed to that job, committed. Now, with John's leadership skills excelling, he ended up becoming the vice president of the organisation in 1965. He was also named third most outstanding JC, which is what the corporation was called, the JC Corporation. And that was in the state of Illinois. Now, during this time, he meets a fellow co-worker and they start dating. And then after dating for a while, they get engaged. So 6 months after they got engaged, they end up getting married. But during this time, Mr. John Wayne the cowboy, well, he wasn't exactly what you would call faithful. Somehow, well, the wife-to-be finds out. Now, honey, she fell on my dick. I didn't touch her. She just fell on my dick. What am I gonna do? She was on my dick. I didn't do anything. So, rather tricky situation. And his wife-to-be forgives him and they go forwards and get married. Now, John has a new father-in-law and he had just purchased 3 different KFCs in Waterloo, which is Iowa. It's Kentucky Fried Chicken. You know the stuff? It's finger-licking good. So the new dad asks John, and he's like, John, I don't really know accents, I'm quite shit really, but John, would you like to manage all 3 of my KFC? And John's like, shit, yeah, of course I will. Yeah, hell yeah, amazing money that, fantastic. Yep, shake your hand right now. So he takes the job and manages 3 KFCs. So Marilyn, the wife, and John, they pick up and they move to Waterloo. And John would later describe this moment of his life as being, it was perfect to him, in his words. It was perfect. Everything was going in the right direction. He had his jobs, he had his house, he had his wife, everything was perfect. Now, in this time, Marilyn gave birth to their son in February 1966, and then she would give birth to their daughter the following March. So John was just doing what he did best, which was working incredibly hard. He was a workhorse. He was also still very actively involved in the JC Corporation, and once he was president at the local JC, he would turn up to meetings with KFC for everyone. He was just the bringer of joy to every meeting. He just had that ability to make everyone trust him. He just drew them in. Everybody felt special around John. He did, however, have one stipulation, that everybody must call him Colonel. He just loved recognition. He was the man. Now, in 1966, his parents came over to visit him, which was very rare, and his father walked towards him, and to John's fear, he raised his hand and said, "Son, I'm proud of you, boy." And to John, that was just everything. He never thought in his whole life he would finally get the recognition from his father, who he actually just thought he hated. But no, the father was proud of his boy. "Take a picture, Mum. I want to be stood next to this boy." In fact, his dad went on to apologise for all the upset he inflicted on him as a child. That's heavy shit right there. Now, to John, it was surreal. He'd finally received his father's recognition and acceptance as a man. I mean, to anybody else, it's like, oh, God, really? He's finally said sorry. Well, I think it's a bit too late for that, isn't it? But to him, it was everything he'd ever wanted from being a young boy. That recognition. He finally got it. Was it too late, though? Now, not all was shiny and perfect as John reminisced, because the JC Corporation, well, they were a little bit fucking cagey. Now, while they had an image that was for getting people back into work and getting right on the good path of life, they had a very dodgy underbelly of society. Now, the JC Corporation were in fact a slightly dodgy affair, as for while they had an image of working with getting people on the right path, they were also a very dodgy underbelly of society indeed. They were heavily involved in porn, human trafficking, drugs, surrenders, and wife swapping. While all this is going on, and obviously John's involved in this underbelly of society, he decides to open a private club in his basement of his house. Obviously it's stacked with KFC, booze and pool tables and everything you can like, and he calls it the John Jolly Clown. So while all this is going on, the John Jolly Clown House of Horrors, well, it opens up as a basement KFC, pool table, booze drinking, bloke's pad. I mean, John would have his basement packed with guys, and not men of his age, young boys, student boys that would work with John at the KFC. They were the targeted workforce that he chose to have around him. Now, after working long hours for John, the Colonel, they would come back to his basement, drink alcohol underage, eat loads of KFC, living the dream. Now, the boys were always praised for their work. They were praised for everything they did. In fact, John would just be intensely commendable to these boys. Everything they did was, "You're amazing. You are my star boy. You can ride my car for a week this week. You have the keys. No one else, just you. You're fantastic. You're definitely going to get a pay rise. What, you need $50 extra this week. God, honestly, what a workhorse. What an amazing boss. I want to fucking work for someone like that. That's great." But at what cost? Now, it didn't take that much time until John would start taking his advances forwards. I mean, he's an amazing boss, right? He's give. What does he get? Well, he gets to sexually harass these young boys, and he pushes the boundaries and sees how far he can get before he goes, "Whoa, I'm just pulling your tail. I'm just playing. I didn't mean it like that. You took it the wrong way. I didn't mean it like that." So in August 1967, John starts getting into a bit of trouble. He'd invited a 15-year-old boy, which was one of the dodgy JC members' sons, back to his basement of doom. Now, he was very keen for this boy to have some booze, watch porn, play pool, play the music, have it all. "You want some KFC?" So John invites him over. He states to the boy, "Now, did you know, to be a real man, you've got to have sex with a man before you can have sex with a woman. Otherwise, you can't do it proper." So this 15-year-old boy is lured in by John, and doesn't know any better and goes through with it. Now, sadly, the young boy would not be the only child to be sexually exploited and raped by John Wayne Gacy. He also went on to trick several other boys, who were very young boys, to taking part in what he would call scientific experiments into homosexual experiences. I think it's right to say that you work at fucking KFC, mate, so what science degree do you hold? And for their thanks, he would give them $50 and KFC. Now, thankfully, this young boy went straight to his father, who also worked at the JC, and told him what John Wayne Gacy had done to him. And his father, well, he was fucking pissed. His dad got straight to the cops, and John, he was arrested. He was charged with oral sodomy. Now, at this point, John comes up from his basement of hell, grabs the wife and kids, and stands at the front doorstep and look, I'm a father, a pillar of this community. I do everything for all of you. How can you say this about me? John was furious. He stated that the father of the JC Corporation had actually used this for a political reason, a stint to try and get John sidetracked so he could go and reap the glory. Nobody was listening. But John proceeded. He wanted a polygraph. I'll prove you all. I'm telling the truth. He wanted a polygraph and he wanted it now. Well, to his fear of peacocking, that's exactly what they offered him. They taped John up and they asked him the specific questions needed relating to the abuse. And to John's dismay, it came back as, "You a liar, boy." So John was indicted on sodomy charges on May the 10th, 1968. So John is pretty pissed at this point. Now he's thinking, I've got the court case coming up, I need to deal with this little shit, his 15-year-old. So he gets two of his KFC kids to go and rough him up a bit and scare him so he wouldn't turn up to court. But thankfully, he gets free. He clocks the two lads and knows who they are, tells his dad rings the police, and John's back in the nick again explaining himself. And he gets charged with trying to intimidate an eyewitness. So John has to have a medical on his mental state, and he was actually diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. But they also determined that he indeed wasn't fit and sound of mind to stand trial. So in this write-up for John, it was documented that any therapy would not be successful, as John most certainly would go and re-offend again. Yeah, that is a big fucking red flag. Hello, it's a no-no. He's not safe for the community. Underline it. Did you read it? Did you? So John was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Now, on the same day, Marilyn, his wife, applied for a divorce and got sole custody of the two children. Now, John never saw her and the two children ever again. Now, you would think John would be at this point, at rock bottom in his life, and this is the shitter of all shitters, isn't it? You're going to prison, you're not going to see your kids again, your wife's divorcing you. But no, he just ploughed on through and moved into prison, and he excelled. Now, John became head chef, and he worked so hard that he got everyone a pay increase. If there was any upset, anyone had a problem, go to John. So all the inmates completely confided and trusted in John, and he was pretty much running the ship. And if that wasn't enough, he would join the trustee of JC inmates and increase the membership by around 600 more. I think having a multi-complex personality disorder just made him switch up and adapt and move on. Obviously, being a psycho has its perks. Now, he also went on to jump hoops, enabling the inmates to be allocated with a golf course. What? Fucking hell. I mean, this guy could indeed have stood for president. Sorry, Ted Twattington Bundy, but this guy gives you a run for his money. It is actually a real shame about John Wayne Gacy in the sense that he was just gifted with business acumen, and he chose such a dark path. Now, having this business ability and creating a strong community anywhere he landed, well, let's just say that in prison, this guy was recognised for commendable behaviour. And it was just after 18 months of a 10-year sentence. Yes, he was let out on bail. And his parole was for a year. So John walks out of prison. He's already voicing his campaign to the community that he is a complete changed man. Prison works, look at me. So he moves back to Chicago and he gets a job as a chef. And it didn't take long for him to get bored and, well, get back to his warped ways. Now listen, it was only a year and he was arrested. Now before I go into this, can we go back to the medical assessment of this man? The paperwork stated that he would indeed repeat his crimes and had an antisocial personality disorder. Also that therapists would in no way make this nut able to circle the community safely. So John was arrested on assaulting a teenage boy on several different occasions. Now these charges ended up being dropped and John was free to go. Again. The Iowa Parole Board had no idea of what actually happened previously with him. I don't understand that. How did they not know? How is it not officially on paper for all states to read the criminal history? So John's parole ends and John's criminal convictions, well, they're just sealed. They're sealed and destroyed. And he gets to just go forward and start a new life. So John and his personality disorders and his shielded ego, well, he just goes and buys a house with his mother, who is like an enabler, and they go and create strong foundations. Well, he just goes and buys a house with his mother and gets straight to work at recreating strong foundations. His networking, his community, his army. So John started a part-time construction business and also is chefing on shift. So this construction business, well, I kid you not, it takes off. And John Wayne Gacy, he's fantastic at interior design, darling. Yeah. That good, he had to stop chefing and completely focus all his attention on his construction business, which catered for remodelling, decoration, extensions, interior design. As I was saying about his strength from the local community, well, he would do cheap rates for the neighbours. Everyone who knew him would say, "Oh, what are you doing at your house? Just go to John down the street, he'll lend you a load of bits. He's lovely, he does everything for everyone." In fact, every year, I kid you not, he goes outside and he ploughs all the snow for all the grannies. He's just bloody lovely. Honestly, I love him to bits. Now this guy, every year in the summer, would have barbecues. And I'm talking, he put 2 big barbecues either side, rack of ribs. He was pushing his boundaries big time. 400 plus people would attend. And if you didn't get invited, well, you felt like a piece of shit because he was the it guy. Everybody that attended these barbecues would be like, "Hey, now you're all here, I want to tell you that I've got the Jolly Joker Clown Club that's down in my basement." Okay, sounds a little bit fucking weird. Now, the Jolly Joker Clown Club would do some good work at parades, fundraise children's hospitals. So their aim was they would go around and make people smile. I'm sorry, you know I don't like clowns. I'd just be like, "Step back, don't come near me." And they were supposed to lift people's spirits. Now, John's clown had 2 characters. One was Pogo and one was Patches. Now Pogo was very fun and loved to make everybody smile and giggle. But Patches, well, he was depending on the mood. John would later state in an interview that, "Did you know clowns are so naughty? Well, they can get away with murder." So all things are going in the right direction for John. He's got these infamous barbecues. He's got Killer Clown Club in his basement again. Mum's upstairs making his tea. His construction business is booming. And then he gets a second chance at a relationship. An old flame from back in the day. Well, he'd met her before and her name was Carol. And she had 2 little girls. And John was very quick to say, "Right, you guys are going to move in with me." And this is exactamundo what they all did. They didn't mess around too. They got married in 1972. So they've been married for around 3 years and John randomly collars Carol and is like, "Right, I just want to tell you that I'm actually bisexual." Now there's not much info on this apart from they stayed married and she obviously must have been supportive. Now it's Mother's Day and John gives Carol, well, he gives her one on Mother's Day. That was her gift. There you are. He gets his leg over on her on Mother's Day. What a gentleman. And then he leans up and states that this will be the last time we do this. We're never having sex again. Do you understand? There isn't much on this either with Carol, but it was sort of, there's like snippets of details that she was just a bit bamboozled by it. She thought it must be a phase, or he can't have been serious. But after this point, they never did. He was very much, that was it, no more. So Carol gets a bit suspicious and she's like, what is actually going on down there? You know, me and the girls would come in and I come in from work with the kids and it's like, don't see him, he's always in the basement doing basement shit. And, well, she goes down and she has a bit of a rake. So she comes across stacks of gay porn mags everywhere. And she also finds several men's wallets with all their stuff in, like driving licence, everything you would need. So she goes and confronts John. She's like, Colonel, Lord John, can I just have a chat, Dal? Because I'm just a bit freaked out by, I know you said you're bisexual, so there's all the porn downstairs, and, you know, me and you don't do anymore, and that's fine. I really didn't like it anyway. But anyway, the point is that downstairs I found loads of men's wallets. Why have you got all that, darling? Collecting? So at this point, they're both like passing ships in the night. There's not much communication going on at all. And John loves that because she and the kids, well, they're just, you know, they're a facade. And he doesn't need to talk. It's just fucking annoying. He just wants to come in and do what he does. But when she comes to him with these questions, he's just like, you shut the hell up, woman. This is my house. I pay the bills. You got no right to be questioning nothing. You understand? Capiche? Well, she was just absolutely sick of it. You know, she was like, it's like clubbing fucking America in here. Can't we just have a family night? And she kept going and going, and he was not happy. So, to Carol's record, they basically kept out of each other's way for about 6 months. And apparently the finale that caused the separation was a bounce check. It's what was statemented, but, you know, total bullshit. So John conveniently employs high school students. So the business itself was employing these young whippersnappers to lift all the heavy loads, and then, you know, John could have a bit of a perv too. And he would. He'd test the water. He'd push and see how far he could go. Anybody that was interested, well, you need to come round to mine. Have a pool table, free beer, like KFC. Now, some of the students would be very, very gullible and vulnerable, and they'd be drawn in by all these offerings. And others were just like, nah, John, no, piss off, don't come near me. No, don't want to talk to you. No. And they'd be firm. And he'd laugh it off, you know, oh, I'm only kidding with you. And they'd be like, yeah, oh, it's just John, isn't he? He goes too far. And they would have the boundaries. But the other kids that were slightly more vulnerable or needed the cash or were sort of looking up to the colonel as the amazing man, and they didn't dare not say no, well, they were the ones he kept pursuing. So it's late at night and it's 1976, and John drives past a young chap, pulls down the car window, and the boy says that he's a hitchhiker and he's got nowhere to go. So John gives him a lift and says, straight away, I've got my own house, I've got my own construction company, come and work for me, I'll turn your life around. So John gets the lad moved in and then finds out that actually it's his birthday. Oh boy, let's celebrate. Now John heads off to get into his clown outfit while the boy gets settled in. So John walks in and he's in clown, and the young chap is sat down and is like, okay, you're a clown. And he's like, well, it's your birthday and I wanted to show you what I do. And he's like, yeah, that's cool, that. Yeah, God, you really look like one. You look amazing, yeah. Being overly polite. So John sits down and he's like, do you want me to show you a clown trick? Now at this point I'm thinking, first of all, you know I don't like clowns. Do not like clowns. Second of all, I'm thinking, wait a minute, mate, clowns don't do fucking tricks. They make you laugh and they make you smile. So whatever trick you've got going on, trick off, because I'm off. Okay, bye. But the poor lad sits there And, you know, he's just being polite and lovely because this guy's just offered him a life package. And he shows him, he's like, look at these handcuffs, right? I bet you I can get out of these. And he puts them behind his back and he clicks them and he gets the boy to check, because there's no way I can get out of those, right? And hey presto, John gets out of the handcuffs. It's a clown trick. Never really heard of it myself, to be fair. So he shows the lad and he's like, no way, come on, John, tell me how he did it. So John's like, right, you do it. Click, click. Now the mood changes. John is very dark at this point, and he has this boy under complete control. No words are said, but the boy kicks out, and he knows all is not right. And he fights with John the hardest he can to escape this warped, dark, fucking weird clown. And as soon as he gets out, somehow he gets free. Instantly, John's back. Whoa, 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 I was just pulling your snake. I'm just messing with you. Were you scared? Did you think I was being real? That's just what I do. It's a joke. Somehow, I don't understand how, but the boy manages just to go to bed early and just shake it off. And John goes to bed. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't long until John became very frustrated and tried his luck again. He didn't get into his clown outfit this time. He just went straight for the boy, and he wanted what he wanted. He's like, maybe you don't know who I am, and I think you better give me what I want. Well, that was it. The lad just kicked him right in the nuts, and he was like, do you know what, John, I'm fucking done. I'm moving out. You're a fucking nightmare. You're an absolute predator. Fuck off. And he fled. They were my words, to be honest, because that's what I would have said. But he did still work at the construction site. He stayed working there, and he just dodged him. He was like, oh yeah, it's there. And he'd go around the other way and keep away from him. But I mean, the risk there was massive, but oh God, thank God he got away. So John is feeling very frustrated, very annoyed, because to him, all he does is give. Everybody gets what they want. Everybody gets a job increase. Everybody gets to use his car. Everyone gets $50. Everyone gets KFC. But what does John Wayne get? Now, this was another night of heavy booze, drugs and pool. And he had a basement full of young lads. So John is showing this lad his magic trick, which we have just spoken about, which is the handcuffs. Now, they're very young and they're very impressionable, and they very much look up to this man who literally owns them. In fact, they don't have a pot to piss in without this guy's amazing construction site and his ability to say, you can have that. So the young lad is, he puts himself first. I'll do it, John. I'll do the trick. I'll do it. Showing off in front of the lads. And he puts his hands out and John handcuffs him. Come on, John. Tell us, what's the secret? How do you get out of these handcuffs then? So John leans in and he whispers to this young lad. And he says, the secret to this trick is in fact having the key. Well, no fucker had the key, did they, apart from John? Now, John would abuse and rape and completely mess these young men up. It was gruesome and disturbing, utterly disturbing what he would do to them. So if they're not all completely traumatised enough, John has the last fandango to his final magic trick, which was called the rope trick. This was John's tying a rope around the neck and strangling them to death. He would also ram others' underwear down the throats. He would literally thrust it down their throats, ripping into their skin and choke them to death. They would asphyxiate. Now, some of these bodies he would just leave under his bed for days. So John's got this all-American house with a very low vaulted basement, which was called a crawl space. And he feels this is the perfect spot to chuck down the dead bodies. A perfect spot for these dead young men. Now, he would go down and scatter quicklime all over the tops to help with the rotting and the smell. It was said also as well that some of the bodies he would keep upstairs and actually embalm them. Obviously a skill in LA that he was taught. Now John didn't care who these boys were. They just had to be young and be boys. It was a mixture as well how he came into contact with these victims. Some were just passing through, some were from work interviews, and some he actually knew. It was usually always in exchange for things like money, new career, anything to lure them in. Now somehow John gets hold of a police badge, and I kid you not, a siren for the top of his car. Now he had 3 cars. Don't fill up, I can't take it. Fucking killer clown going around with a police siren. And nobody suspected anything. The fuck? Now this is just a complete disaster, isn't it? I mean, not only was this guy supposed to serve 10 years in prison, but he is terrorising the area and no one pulls him or reports him. I mean, there is a shit ton on Carol, his second wife, who supposedly divorced him over a bounce cheque. There were rumours that she may have been aware of his behaviours, or even worse, being forced as an accomplice. But this could be somewhat hearsay. Now, police would later state that they did see the heavy flow of boys into John's, but none of the boys ever voiced any concern. Oh, it's all right then, isn't it? Of course not. He was rather powerful, not only paid their wages, but was rather convincing with a fucking gun. Do as you're told. I mean, the police situation is weird. You have a large amount of missing young guys and a shit ton going to Killer Clown Friday night pool, and you're not joining the dots. The police would later state that they just thought the missing were just runaways. Well, you know what thought did, don't you? So John goes and attends a family get-together, and there is an ice display in the town centre that happens once a year. So he catches up with the fam, and then he heads into town to go and have a look at the displays. Now it's dark, cold, freezing, and John clocks a very young boy at a bus station and proceeds to pull over. He asks him what's he doing out here at this time of night, and does he need a lift anywhere. So John, being John, gets the boy to agree to come back to his and his, offerings of warm night and a bed and keeping cosy and all the rest of the bullshit he comes out with. The boy goes and gets cosy and gets tucked in for the night, and John proceeds to bed. Now the next part of this is the only evidence of what John states, because unfortunately, well, the young boy doesn't have a voice anymore. Now John states that he woke up with the boy standing over him in bed with a knife in his hand. John jumps out of bed and grabs the boy, to which the knife cuts John. He states that he then twisted the boy's arm, and that's how the boy died. Now the reality of this situation was that he grabs the boy's arm and gives him like a Chinese burn, so he would drop the knife, and then he kicks the boy to the side into some sort of brawl. And John gets on top of the boy and erratically stabs him several times. And then walks into the kitchen to find 2 plates set and the table. Bacon cooked and eggs out ready to fry. So the young boy was obviously coming into the bedroom to ask him how he has his eggs, because he was cooking a breakfast as a thank you. John said this experience gave him euphoric, perverted, orgasmic thrills, and he enjoyed it very much. He then seated himself with the breakfast that the poor little boy had made, and then he put the body down with the others that were already decomposing. So he heads to the basement and covers the body remains that were building, and he covers the area with concrete. Now this brutal killing was the last for at least 2 whole years. Why there is such a gap, I'm not certain, to be honest, but John would definitely be less cautious, and the police were becoming increasingly interested in his habits and whereabouts. Now in 1976, Chicago police suspected John to be responsible for the disappearance of a 9-year-old boy. But John lived just outside of their jurisdiction, so it was put to the police that were in charge of his area to hopefully pursue it. God, it's just a bit fucking lax, isn't it? Now in 1977, there was a 27-year-old that was lured into John's car. He drugged him with chloroform and brutally raped and beat him. He beat him very bad. This man headed straight to the police, and they didn't take it seriously whatsoever. It was just disgusting. A complete letdown. Now this guy only had so much memory because he'd been knocked out with chloroform. But he made it his mission to find that dirty bastard that did it to him. And he would scour the pubs and clubs and bars to find the car of what he remembered. So he's scouring the streets and he comes across the car. It's the car. He writes down the reg and he gets straight to the police station. He stands and he has to plead his case. He's like, go, he's there. That is the car, that's the reg, I remember it. You need to go and investigate him. You need to fucking arrest him. Now this guy would go on and file a civil lawsuit against John. He stated that John turned to him in the car and said, do you want some weed? But actually it was a cloth of chloroform. So as they turned, he offered and then he knocked him straight out with the chloroform. John handcuffed him and brutally sexually assaulted him. And then he just let him go. So after all these efforts of this guy actually doing the copper's job, the outcome was John was charged with battery. And that's it, battery. I must say, they really do send such a really good message, don't they? Please do go on your way and be consistent in what you're doing. So John has to pay the victim $3,000 and that's it. I mean, at this point you could go and search his house, you could search his car, you could search the construction site. What? This poor victim, bless him, went on to write a book and it's titled 29 Below. You should read it, it's good. Now there was then another gunpoint attack and this 19-year-old was taken at gunpoint. He was forced to do sexual stuff with John and I mean John just loved to see them in tears. He loved to see the torture, the vulnerability, the fear. He got off on it big time. Inflicting as much pain as he possibly could was his kick, his sexual arousal. He really got a lot from it. Now John let this kid go and John was soon taken into custody and he admitted having engaged in sexual activities with the young boy but insisted although the sex was incredibly brutal, the young boy consented to taking part. No, I think if he's in a police station and he's absolutely beside himself in fear, I think you take him seriously, not Big Bad John, the Colonel. Now I kid you not, that was shut down and never pursued. And John, well, he was still very much a pillar of the community and was the director of the annual Polish Constitution Polling Day. I think he just likes a fucking title. So because he's racking up all these fancy BS titles, it enables him to have a photo with the First Lady. Yes, I'm not joking, the President's wife. I think it's fair to say that she's probably fucking regretting that now. We still have that killer clown psychopath with me on that photo. Get rid of it. What? I don't get it right. What is going on with this guy? I mean, he must have like a full Harry Potter fucking veil of protection. How many times? How many red flags? It's literally the cloak of invisibility bullshit going on. It's like, what? And think about this, right? You're having a photo with the president's wife. So surely to God, the FBI do a thorough search on you. And John Wayne Gacy, Killer Clown Psycho Man, is fine to see those people. Well, I mean, I don't even know why I'm questioning it, to be honest. Nobody's done shit about all these things he's done. So why check now? Why check? So it's 1978 and John's crawl space dungeon of hell is absolutely rammed. How does it not absolutely reek? So he's wondering where to put bodies now because he's running out of space. So he thinks about maybe putting them up in the eaves of the attic. But then he's thinking, the smell, you know, like the dripping of dead bodies, decomposing comes through the ceiling, that's not going to work, is it? So he's trying to have a plan, he's trying to work something out. So Big Bad John sat there and he's like, my house is full of dead bodies, I don't know where to bung any more now. So he just decides to start dumping them in the local river. So he would end up dumping a total of 5 bodies in the river. Now on December the 11th, 1978, at around 9 p.m, there was a 15-year-old boy and he had just finished work at the local pharmacy. Good old mum has come to pick him up. Now it's his mum's 46th birthday and they have plans to go and celebrate with the family. Anyway, her lovely boy runs out and is like, Mum, can you just give me 10 minutes? This guy at a construction site, he wants to offer me a job. It might be more pay than what I'm getting here. She's like, yeah, that's fine, Dad. I'll stay here. You go and have a nap and see what he says. Come back though, don't be long, will you? And he's like, well, Mum, birthday girl, see you in a bit, bye. So off he goes. And Mum's waiting in the car. She keeps the engine running because it's absolutely freezing. Now, it's been a while. And she's just starting to, you know, think, oh, God, they must be having a real big conversation, you know, it must be a big job for him, you know. And she's patient and she wants the best for him and she's just waiting. And she's still waiting. And she's becoming very worried. So she starts the engine after having a little look down the alleyway to see where he is, and all the lights are off, everything's shut down, and she's thinking, oh, where the bloody hell's he gone? So she gets back to the car and she speds home to her husband and the kids. Now her husband and the daughters and the 2 dogs, everybody just gets and rams in the car, and they're off in the car to try and find their boy. So it gets to around 11 p.m. at night and they go to the police station to report him missing. Now, this missing person file really hit home to a police officer on call that night, as he also had a son in the same year at the same high school. So the lieutenant decides to take on this case himself, and he has a fire in his belly to get to the bottom of it. So this lieutenant, he heads out to find who last saw the boy, and it turns out the chemist where the boy worked, well, they were having a remodelling from a construction site. So Mum had told the detectives that her son said he was talking to a guy about a job on a construction site. So he leaves an answer machine to John Wayne Gacy, who owns the biggest construction site going in the area. So at 11 p.m. on December the 12th, John calls the police station, and he's very arrogant and, didn't really give a shit, picking his nose while he's on the phone. So do you still need me to come in or what? Yes, that would really help with our investigation. If you could do that, please, John, that'd be wonderful. No, I'll be there in about 10 minutes, no probs. Now, it's gone 1 a.m. and John is a no-show. And the reality, why is a no-show? Well, because he's making his way to the river to dump the poor boy's body. So John gets the body into the boot of the car and he proceeds to drive south to the river to dump the body and then make a quick dart back to the station to talk to the coppers. I'm sure he's cool as a cucumber, as geez, he's just fucking untouchable, isn't he? Now, actually, the luck was not on his side at this point because he hits some black ice and he slams the car into a ditch. So it gets to around 3 a.m. in the morning when actually he finally gets dragged out by a rescue team and then heads straight to the police station at 3 a.m. in the morning. And he's covered in mud and crap, and he walks into the police station, gone 3 in the morning, he's like, right, I've come along because you need to speak to me about something. And the woman behind the reception's like, 3 a.m, mate, do you want to come back in the morning? Oh yeah, I'll come back in the morning. So John comes back in the morning. He makes a brief statement, and the lieutenant, he doesn't like him, and he sees right through him, and he thinks he's full of bullshit. In fact, he suspected that John had the boy in his house and he was holding him hostage. After a bit of back and forth, John agrees to give his house keys to the police. Unfortunately, they don't find anything that links to the young boy, but they do find a ton of gay porn, needles, a starter pistol, rope, an 18-inch dildo and the handcuffs. Now, it's not illegal to own any of this, but the coppers had that feeling and they just know something just is not right. Now, just when they're at a loss of searching, they come across a receipt. Now, this receipt states it's for photographs which were from the pharmacy the boy works at. And this was a bit of a breakthrough because this was enough proof to get a warrant to seize John's cars. Now, they could be put under forensic. Now, they find fibres that are non-conclusive enough to match, but they also had sniffer dogs. Now, dogs are just amazing, aren't they? And these dogs can smell death. So if a dog lays down and they are trained sniffers, it means that somebody had died in that area, and this is just what they did in his car. Now, even though they have all this evidence, it just isn't conclusive enough without an actual person. After all the efforts to obtain the evidence needed, it was just not enough to hold John, and therefore he was released. What's new? Days later, items that had been taken as possible evidence, well, it was just amazing because one was connected to the boy but was not directly owned by him. And you would think, well, what is it then? But it was actually a class ring, and it was one of his classmates who actually was registered as missing. He'd been missing for 2 years. So the police, at this point, I'm so excited, they head to the construction site and they interview all the young kids that work for him while they're all chewing on shitty-ass KFC. And several noted that it was odd that they had many workers over the years that worked there, and then sometimes they just never turned up again and never saw them again. Oh, that's really, really normal, that. So on that same day, John offers the police, he calls them up and he's like, I'd like you all to come round, I'm going to cook you breakfast. So they all come round and have breakfast, and he's got a big, big fry up going for them. And as soon as they walk in, several officers said they could smell death in the house. And is it possible that John wanted them coming round on his terms because he could do a big cook-up, chuck a load of, like garlic and paprika in there and make the house smell, because he could prep the scene. He was in control. But they could smell right through it. And they asked him, what's that smell, John? It smells like something's died. Didn't have much of an answer, I'd like you to know that. Not one solid answer. And also, one of the other police officers noted that John looked like shit. He looked drained. He wasn't his usual jolly clown self. He was stressed, under pressure. They could just sniff it. So as soon as the police left, they were not aware that John already had made proceedings to have a top lawyer represent him. Now, the lawyer had filed a lawsuit against the state and the police department for $750,000 for harassment. They were taking items out of his home and publicly destroying Colonel's reputation. So it's a bit of a shitter for the police at this point, because they were pretty much banned from this point now for going anywhere near and rummaging until they got some solid evidence to be able to then get a warrant and go in again. So it's December 21st, 1978, and John was followed to a gas station and was seen handing over a wrapped bag. Boom. They seized him, grabbed the bag, and to their delight, it was stashed full of cannabis. Amazing breakthrough, because not only are they getting him for something that's trivial to them at that point, because it's not really what they want him for, but it gives them a perfect opportunity to legitimately go above the lawsuit. They've got a right and they can get into the property with law on their side, and they can search his shit. Now, a day before this actual arrest and him selling cannabis, he actually goes and visits his solicitor, who is very keen to chat about the civil matter, because, he's going to get a cut out of his $750K, isn't he? Harping on at what cost it's going to cost, because he's worked so hard and all the rest of it. And John peers and loses track and sees a newspaper article. And it's of the distress of the missing boy with the family, and he just stares at it blankly. And he looks up and says, he's dead. He's in a river. The solicitor's jaw must have literally planted on the floor. And that was it. He sat down and reeled off every account of what had happened and what he had done. Now, John had killed 32 men after having brutal sexual intercourse with them. Let's say raped. So John would tell everything that happened, but he was the third party. He would speak of it as the third party, the third person. And the solicitor seemingly said after that it was a very surreal experience. It was so strange to listen. And that he was extremely descriptive. He didn't hold back with anything, but he had no remorse. So John was just utterly non-emotional to anything that he was describing. He had no pulse to it, no sadness, no remorse. He just wanted to state what had happened. That was it. The solicitor would state that his eyes were dark and heavy, with a little bit of a glimmer in his face of enjoyment whilst describing everything that he had done, which, let me tell you, was incredible cruelty, evil. The solicitor would also explain that John became rather exhausted and drained halfway through all the descriptive detail of all his evil killings, that he actually dozed off and fell asleep. Yeah, I shit you not, he fell asleep. So the solicitor's like, yes, John, you have a lie down, have a little nap, because I'm going to get you a psychological evaluation, and then we can use it as our meal ticket to get you into a better situation, better outcome in court. But John was like, do you know what, no, I'm not interested, I don't want a meal ticket, I'm off, I've got shit to do. And his shit to do was to go and give that cannabis to the gas station And then he was arrested. So at this point, the police have their warrant and they are going in deep with the house. They go and interview also one of the workers at the construction site. Now, they stated that John had asked them to go into the crawl space and dig trenches in the basement, and had also asked another to pour lime into them. And they were very small trenches. In fact, one of the workers said they were like little mini graves. Fucking brainy bunch, you lot, aren't you? Now, the police actually suspected these other workers that he had at the construction site as potential helpers. Wasn't quite convinced. There's never been any conclusive proof with this. So back at the station, John is being interrogated, and the police are like, John, just tell us where the bodies are and we'll work with you. Just tell us where you've put them. John pipes up and he states, look, the kid isn't down there, but you will probably find a guy down there that I did kill. But I put cement over that one because I was thorough. At this point, have a private chat, and I'm like, what the fuck? So he's got another guy down there. What? We haven't even found this kid yet. And he's saying he's got somebody dead down there. We've got him. Now, once forensics go down into the crawl space, well, they find a trapdoor. And inside this trapdoor, it is just stacked with remains. And these bodies were cut up. They were not just placed down there. They were chopped up in the most disturbing ways. And there were body parts everywhere. And I'm not kidding you, they had to go to the local McDonald's to borrow a frying sieve to go and retrieve all the little parts. Did they give him it back to use? Sorry, just I don't really understand what is going on with this investigation. So under pressure of being interrogated, John admits that there are 27 dead bodies buried in his house. Now, only 4 bodies are recovered at this point, and the missing boy isn't there. Now, John is at a very tricky time at the moment. So John decides he wants a pen and paper, and he does a drawing of where the bodies are in the house. I shit you not, they are everywhere. They are everywhere. Why are all serial killers fucking nose blind? What the hell? How does it not reek the whole street? I mean, this house must have made you gag when you walked in. I have no words. So John is sent to the hospital to undergo a screening and observational diagnosis of psychological imbalances. Yeah, bit fucking late, guys. Bit late. You know, they thought he might just have a few niggles going on. Well, they did do a lot of investigations on him. I think it was like 300 psychiatrists worked with him. And while John was adamant that he had 4 different personalities, well, there were 3 different psychiatrists that work on him, and they diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, multiple personalities, and a stack loads of other issues to go with that too. Now, when it came to prosecution, well, they deemed him fit and sound of mind to stand trial. Yes. So he stands trial with no defects or limitations to his sentencing. So they're all over the house. So it's February the 6th, 1980, and John is charged with 33 counts of murder. He was officially a killer that had killed the most in American history at that time. Do you wonder if you put that as a title? Now, when these killers just confess, the whole court procedure pretty much is just to see if they're sound of mind, and if not, then they can just throw the book at them. I really hope it fucking landed right on his forehead. Now, John had had around 300 hours of psychological tests and was found, even though he was trying to plead not guilty of reasons of insanity. I mean, come on. He was found fit to stand trial. The court hearing was global news and it lasted around 5 weeks. It took the judge just 2 hours to conclude that John was guilty and charged him with 33 murders. He was sentenced to 12 death sentences and 21 natural life sentences. The parents and families of the victims, well, they were just loud in cheers and they were just applauding with relief. They were sobbing, they were relieved. It was some sort of closure for them, finally. I mean, don't forget, these were people with missing children for more than 2+ years. And they were just classed as children that had run away. Nobody ever investigated them. So he's sentenced to death on March 13th, 1980, but he stays in prison for 14 years awaiting the death penalty. While John is locked up, he does do quite a lot of interviews. You know, I mean, he's a narc, he's going to, isn't he? I personally feel this was a really dangerous strategy for him because he had such a gift in business acumen, and he was very gifted at drawing people in and gaining a community and power from that. So giving him interviews I felt was very, very dangerous and wrong. I think if it would have been me as a judge, I'd have been like, yes, I sentence you to solitary confinement with no fucking windows for the rest of your life, and no, you won't have a platform to speak. Fuck off and don't do that shit in my town. Gone. So John Wayne Gacy is in prison and he becomes a bit of an artist. Yes, he is literally constantly readapting his skills. Now he is a fully blown artist. And he has, you know, a stack of letters, and he will pretty much write a letter to any fucker that wants to receive one. You know, if you're a fan, I'm going to be there. I'll write to you. He needed that validation, that acceptance, that want from people. So it's his death sentence coming up. And guess what he had for his final meal? Any guess? He did. He had KFC. So it's midnight on May the 11th. So it's midnight on May the 11th, 1944, and John was 54 years old. He was given the synchronised 3-stage drugs by lethal injection, and at 12:58 a.m. John was pronounced dead. Apparently John's final words were, "Kiss my ass." But I mean, who gives a fuck really what his last words were? Piss off, we don't want you on the planet, you're vile, horrible. And I don't like the death sentence, but honest to God, what an evil, horrendously horrible, beastly man. I mean, he had so many tricks up his sleeve and was an absolute professional con man and drew in the community so dangerously. I do feel he was dangerous to even be in prison. I do feel it is a relief that he is no longer on this planet. Now, there were so many of the body remains that actually were never ever ID'd. So it was very upsetting. It was so traumatising for everybody involved. And they did make makeshift graves for them, and they dated them as sort of a settling time for when they were actually found, which I actually think was a really good thing to do. Unfortunately, with serial killers, they do get quite a fan base. And I mean, they genuinely do. This guy's got a really big fan base, and he's just a big stinky smelly ass, wasn't he? I mean, what is to like about him? He's just lured people in. He was inadequate in so many ways, and he failed himself, and he was an evil monster. There's so many inspirational souls out there that are fighting a good cause, that do good and are people to look up to. And this guy had a really rough start, but let me tell you, friends, unfortunately lots of us do, and it's horrendous, but it doesn't give you a free righteous path in life to do cruel things to others. And it doesn't give you a right to go forward on a distinctive path of fucking doom and cause chaos in everybody's lives just because you don't feel you're rightly approved. You know, there's good and evil all around us, and it's real. So be good to each other. Don't eat too much KFC, please. And for God's sake, don't walk around at night on your own. Go in groups or plan your route beforehand. I say this to my kids every day. And, you know, it sounds awful, and we don't want to live in a world where we're paranoid, but you do need to make those safety plans for yourself. There are, unfortunately, evil people on this planet, and we do need to be aware of that. Well, we have come to the end of my crime story today, and honestly, just thank you so much for all the love and support. I'm loving doing this. It means so much to me, and yeah, I just appreciate every like, every comment, and I'll be with you every week doing my true crime with a dash of bloody lime. And I've got no lime. I need to get some lime. I'm going to get some nice martini glasses, and I might do some cocktails as well before we start, because I'm just going to fab it up a bit. And I love you all, and you're amazing. I'm going to go home now to bed and get in my pit and go to Kip, because I'm such a lady. Love you all.